Welcome back to the People's Mirror. Today we want to put before the People's Mirror a very astonishing story that now puts at the center stage the closest friend of Cyrus Jirongo, Honorable Senator Khaniri, as a key suspect in the demise of Cyrus Jirongo. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the People's Mirror. And if this is your first time interacting with our channel, then please hit the subscribe button for this story and more like this. But before we take a look at this story, let us start way back on the 15th of October 1987, where something happens in Burkina Faso. While in a meeting, Sankara alongside his 12 IDs get killed, and the person that organizes this particular killing is Sankara's closest friend, Honorable Blaise Compaoré. Now, the story of Burkina Faso's 15th October 1987 cements itself in African history as one key story of human betrayal coming from a person in leadership, from a closest friend. In the Sankara issue, it was so close that it was not only a best friend, but someone also serving very close to him in power. Now, coming back to the Jirongo story and every other African demise that has been tapped or termed to be an assassination attempt, sometimes the first point that people always, of course, look at is the point of government. People try as much as possible to try and put a connection between the demise of an individual when it occurs and the activities of the ruling government at that time. So sometimes you find that the government is culpable to some extent, and you can actually trace the culpability of the government in certain assassinations. But in certain times, people look outward, while the real assassin, the real person that orchestrates these particular assassinations, are individuals that exist within. And such is the story of Cyrus Jirongo right now, where not the DCI nor the NIS, but Kenyans on social media platforms that are taking a keen look at the videos that have been recorded since the demise of Cyrus Jirongo are now not connecting certain dots, or rather connecting the dots very perfectly to put individuals that are championing very, very greatly for the justice of Cyrus Jirongo to perhaps be the individuals that now the DCI and the NIS should be looking towards to actually unearth key questions from. That is, if of course the death of Jirongo was a national security issue. But because it was not, or perhaps it might not have been, and it was just a personal murder, it is very, very key for the police and the DCI to look at these certain individuals who we are going to detail before the mirror right now, that their involvement and their last time accounts with Cyrus Jirongo point to them knowing something that they have not detailed to the public so far. Now, let us start with this gentleman called Honorable Senator Khaniri. Khaniri identifies as a very close friend of Cyrus Jirongo, and Khaniri also identifies as a very close family friend. However, he says that his closeness to Cyrus Jirongo is hugely tied around business. Now, we know that business can go sour, but that is not our intention of reading into the statements of Khaniri. We just want to put before the mirror what he said and what we think of it, for the public to decide whether or not Khaniri should be a person of interest in this particular investigation. Now, let us start the demise of Jirongo from the point of this meeting in Oasis Bar, where all conversation narrows back to. The truth is, Jirongo was at Oasis Bar in Karen Plains at one point. And in his meeting, alongside Honorable former Senator of Bungoma County and the current Speaker of the National Assembly, Wetangula, and of course Rebman Malala, who is the entrepreneur and the owner of the Oasis place, and another individual that is unknown. So we have a lot of people of interest here. We have people who are meeting and people who are reporting this meeting as people of interest. And out of these people that are meeting, we have one that is Speaker of the National Assembly, publicly known, and has made statements to his effect and relationship with Jirongo and of that night. And then we have a Rebman, of course, Malala, the owner of the Oasis Bar, whose only mention comes from, of course, Honorable Mr. Khaniri, and in his involvement is only involved to the extent that he was present while this meeting was taking place. Then there is a mention of another individual that is not known. And so that is where it remains, an individual that is not known. Now, I don't want to read more into it. I just want to state the fact that out of the media video that Honorable Khaniri did, Honorable Khaniri testified that by the time he drove into the Oasis Bar, and so Honorable Cyrus Jirongo with these 3 or 4 other individuals that were in this particular meeting, then drove out, his main intention was not to be seen by that camp. And 2, he intended not to be seen by this camp, and even thought thought that he was not seen by this camp. Now, where do we read that Khaniri's intention was not to be seen by this camp or was not seen by this camp? We read it from the point where he's saying that when he called Jirongo at around 11 p.m. to ask Jirongo where Jirongo was, then Jirongo outrightly told him, that is Senator Khaniri, that I am where you left me. Now, Jirongo saying I am where you left me came as a shocker to Senator Khaniri, because Senator Khaniri expected not to have, of course, been so visible to the extent that Jirongo saw him. And so by the time he was making this call, he says he was making this call to follow up on another meeting, which we will talk about very briefly, but it is succinct that by the time he was making this call to Cyrus Jirongo, his intention was he had gone to Oasis and came out of it without Jirongo and his company noticing him. And only at the point that Jirongo said that I am where you had left me is when Khaniri realized that Jirongo had actually seen him. And he says that Jirongo even faulted him for actually driving in and out without going and saying hello to his particular colleagues and friends that they were actually having a meeting with. And Senator Khaniri, in his defense, says that he rubbed that off, telling Jirongo that he perhaps thought that they had a very serious meeting that did not need his of course, intrusion. So that much, let us leave it there. By the time Senator Khaniri was walking into Oasis and coming out of Oasis, his main intention was not to be seen by Jirongo or his cohort, or even to meet them and have a conversation with them. And it was later on at 11 that he felt the need to have a conversation with the Jirongo when he called Jirongo, and he was in shock when Jirongo told him that he was still where Senator Khaniri had left him, and even faulted him for not saying hello to them. Now that's one. So he arrives in his own car in Oasis incognito. Let us just establish the fact around that statement. He arrives incognito, drives in, and drives out. Okay, so let's proceed. So funnily, he had contacted Jirongo during the day to actually set up a meeting that was to take place the following day. And there's another mention of another leader that this particular meeting was to take place at their own home, and this was to take place the following day. Of course, this might not be a security expert, but this plays out as a very interesting alibi. You know, I call you during the day, I want to know about, I set up a meeting with you tomorrow, so that our conversations within the course of the day can be attributed to the meeting that we are set to have the following day. But as we do this, I am very, very aware that there is a meeting, the goat eating meeting, that I will attend, that we usually attend together, and you're probably not going to be there, but I know where to find you. So I drive in and drive out just to confirm whether you are there, hoping that you don't see me, and go to the goat eating, and then I call you to ask where you are, only for you to inform me that you had actually seen me and fault me for not coming to say hello. So this particular meeting is also a very substance of investigation for the DCI. Who actually formed this meeting, who called for this meeting, who set up this meeting, what were the communication around this meeting? Not for the meeting to become a substance of investigation per se, but to see the involvement of this meeting as a possible alibi. Because if he expected to have a conversation with the Jirongo the following day in a meeting, while he knew very well where Jirongo would be at night, then the conversation that he would have with the Jirongo within the day ahead of the meeting the following day would themselves act as an alibi, a protection of their friendship, as a way of preparing for the following day meeting, while in essence obtaining key information on the whereabouts and movements of Jirongo the night and the day prior. So this particular meeting is also something that the DCI should actually look into. Then let's proceed a little bit. So he knew where to find Jirongo that night, and even called him just a few minutes to his death. Of course, we said that. And we go on to the point where once he dies at 3 a.m., even before we go to once he dies, you know, interestingly enough, one thing is that Senator Khaniri does not corroborate his location during the entire involvement post Jirongo leaving that place of work, because at some point, from the car on the road, there's a statement he said here. Yes, he says that he called Jirongo. Of course, let's go back to the call part. He said that he called Jirongo and asked Jirongo where he was. And after Jirongo, of course, told him that I am where you left me, and the whole story that we had said, the interviewer asked him that where were you when you were making this call to to Jirongo when he said that he's still where you had left him. Where were you? Then he says he was still in Karen, not far from where the likes of Jirongo were. So he does not actually identify a particular locality where he was, but he says he was not in Karen. He was still in Karen, but not where Kina Jirongo were, though a close place. You remember Khaniri confirming that he was in a close range at Oasis contradicts the statements of Wetangula. Of course, Wetangula says that by 10 he had left, and even Khaniri himself confirms that by the time he was making this particular call to Jirongo, Jirongo confirmed that his colleagues had left and he was just finishing up to leave. So he made this call when he was around the presence of the Oasis bar to confirm whether or not Jirongo was still in unity of his colleagues, and he confirmed that the colleagues had left. And Khaniri himself says that this is what he told Jirongo. He told Jirongo, I quoted it, said, "You are staying up late and we have a meeting tomorrow. Can you go home? You are staying up late and we have a meeting tomorrow. Can you go home?" So I drive in, know whether you are there with your colleagues. I drive out. I go somewhere near. I call you to confirm whether you are still with your colleagues. I remind you of our meeting tomorrow, but pressure you to go home. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like Khaniri was impatient with his mission and he wanted to know if this fact trailed that way. Of course, we are not the DCI. We're just connecting dots of an involvement that the DCI should take an interest in. And so we think that if Khaniri at this particular point, ladies and gentlemen, was hovering around and knew about the whereabouts of Jirongo and himself asked Jirongo to go home, he knew something or wanted something with Jirongo. It was not just a personal friendly quest. It was not just a personal friendly quest. If this was the nature of their conversation, then maybe he should tell us every other previous records where he had sent a message to Jirongo asking Jirongo to go home other than this night. But if this was an isolated event, that this was the night that Khaniri himself asked Jirongo to go home, then that is also motive for thought. Now, interestingly, or the most interesting fact is this, is that at 3 a.m. when the body was actually being retrieved, the only public servant, the only senator, the only public figure who was actually there to retrieve the body was, of course, Senator Khaniri. Now, for that, you can say they were close friends and they actually buddies. And when the wife called him, he saw the need to actually arrive there. But isn't it so convenient that the last person for Jirongo to call at 10 or at 11 p.m. asking Jirongo to go home is the first person to arrive to retrieve Jirongo's body from Naivasha? That particular dot, ladies and gentlemen, might not look like a very advanced interpretation of security details, but for a very ordinary mind, like my ordinary mind, it seems so convenient for the person asking you to go home, the person surveying your movements and your meetings and coming incognito and leaving incognito, calling you a few minutes to your demise of the place, or a few minutes to your demise, of course, calling you a few minutes just when you're about to leave the pub, asking you to go home, becomes the first person to arrive at the scene of accident to retrieve your body. That is so convenient. That is really so convenient. Now, if you think that is the end of it, this is the most convenient story that has come out of Senator Khaniri's own mouth. He says that while the wife of Jirongo was waiting for Jirongo at the police station, this is at 3 a.m. Himself, he had arrived at Naivasha at around that 3 a.m. and he was the first to be there at the scene. He was there with the body without the wife of Jirongo. The wife of Jirongo and the others were waiting at the police station, but Senator Khaniri was at the scene of the accident with the body, the police officer, the bus driver that Kenyans have now discredited, and the few that were there. Remember, there were no passengers at this time. Remember, there were no CCTV or anyone coming from the petrol station this time. And if you took a look at the CCTV, even the second car that came after the accident passed, so no one stood. So the first people of contact with the body of Cyrus Jirongo at this scene of accident at 3 a.m. is Honorable Senator Khaniri, a police officer, and the bus driver. Even the wife was still waiting at the police station for this car to be towed, and when he arrived there, he said he saw the car of Mheshimiwa. He was the first to take pictures even without the wife, and he found of course Mheshimiwa dead in that particular spot. Now this is very interesting. It is very, very interesting how Senator Khaniri is very, very present throughout this night. The beginning of it, we don't know what happens between 11 and 3, because here is where most people are asking what really happened between 11 and 3. But one thing for sure is that by the time Jirongo was leaving Oasis, Senator Khaniri was hovering somewhere around. We don't know where exactly, but he was somewhere around that particular place. And at the time the accident is taking place, he says when Jirongo's wife called him, he does not confirm that he was in his house or anywhere, because that way we would corroborate. We'd go and say, okay, he was called while he was in his house and he left. But he does not say where he was. He says he received this call and he arrives among the first few people in the scene. Now, we would say if the 65 passengers were there, then you would say this was a lively scene at 3 a.m. But these passengers are still non-existent. So it was the driver's story, or the driver, if he was there, the driver that now says that there was a lot of traffic and Jirongo was overtaking. But the CCTV showing clearly there was no traffic or any overtaking. So it was that driver, it was the police officer that has not been identified. Only from the statements of Khaniri is the fact that there was a police officer loading the car, and Khaniri himself, and of course the people that were loading the car. Now, he says that he is also part of the people that actually, no, not part, but he was there when the body was actually sealed and taken to Lee Funeral Home. And from Lee Funeral Home, alongside the wife of Jirongo, is when now they went to Gigiri and relayed this information, stayed there, and of course now started the burial preparations. He is the, I don't know, assistant chairperson of the burial committee or certain things, and he has been involved even as a friend of the committee during this particular post-mortem. So his involvement and placing is not a friend look. It looks like a person that is involved in this particular ordeal, and post this ordeal is present in everything that is being discussed to oversee that this particular ordeal goes as planned. But all these statements are just speculations and thoughts of a very independent citizen that does not in any way run a security agency. And if the family, of course, is dissatisfied with the postmortem, which they have not shown any dissatisfaction with this far, then they should ask the DCI to look at everyone that has been involved in this particular saga and has been mentioned or has made statements from as early as when Jirongo passed on, including the people identifying as his friends. But if they are satisfied with the report that has since come from the postmortem, and of course the CCTV that has been unveiled by the officers of the government, the DCI, which now shows a clear proof of what happened, then we should put to rest this particular story. Though as it stands, really, ladies and gentlemen, a close mentor and a close business partner is someone that you can always take out, because business can go wrong. The way Khaniri describes his relationship with Jirongo is so secondary that it does not go to the key tenets of friendship that you would say he would not be involved in the demise of Jirongo. And of course, his involvement in the key parts of this particular investigation and trail, even prior to the death of Honorable Jirongo, is also a very key issue that the DCI should take a look at. So yes, he says he was there at 3 at the scene with the police and the body. Says that he shared a long relationship with Jirongo and they were close. He calls for forensics and a stronger postmortem, saying that he's the last person who was actually called. And Khaniri is among the group of individuals that have now downplayed the CCTV footage from the government, saying that they don't think that is how things went down. So he knows for a fact, he says that he says actually that he knows for a fact that after Jirongo left Oasis, he did not go to Park Place. He says that he knows for a fact. You'd wonder how he would know for a fact movements of an adult human being, but he says that he knows for a fact. He talks of unclear circumstances and a mystery that needs to be unraveled. But here the People's Mirror, we feel like Honorable Senator Khaniri is in the middle of this mystery, and if there's any unraveling of this mystery, it needs to come from of course the respective forces looking at this matter, investigating it and unraveling it for the Kenyan people. Now, the Office of the Director of Criminal Investigation can carry out any investigation under their own accord. You cannot direct them, of course, to do that. They have their own independence. The same way the Office of Director of Public Prosecution have the independence of starting, ending, or terminating any ongoing criminal proceedings in the country. So we hope that in that individual capacity, even if their family might not want to actually probe beyond what the proof has been, corruption that caused the demise of the good former member of parliament for Lugari constituency. These independent investigations are good for solidifying and strengthening these offices now and moving into the future for the trust of the Kenyan people on how these offices carry out their works. And for that to be done, every other person, even including the friends of Jirongo, need to actually be looked at very, very keenly to answer these questions that are still lingering in a lot of Kenyan people's minds. This is the People's Mirror. Until our next episode.